Welcome back to Red and Blue. I am Major Garrett. A new poll from the Wall Street Journal appears to be good news for Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. The survey shows DeSantis now leading former President Donald Trump 52% to 38% among likely Republican primary voters. The Florida governor also has a higher favorability rating among that group than the former president. For more on all this, we are joined by the Florida bureau chief at Politico, Matt Dixon. Matt, it's great to see you. One poll does not a presidential campaign make, but this is a credible poll viewed by many in the political circles as significant in terms of what it says about politics at any given moment. How do you imagine the DeSantis team is digesting this particular one?
Well, snapshots are important, but they're not the entire story, as you alluded there. Governor DeSantis has been winning straw polls that have included President Trump for a very long time. And I think head-to-head, if it was Ron DeSantis versus Donald Trump, I think that would be great for the DeSantis team. I think they would welcome that, and I think they would like that. The thing to watch, I think, moving forward, and as we enter a potential, Republican primary ecosystem, is how much of the MAGA or America First base that President Trump is going to continue to hang on to. And by that, I mean the people who are never going to leave him no matter what. Because if it's a 6 or 7 or 8-way primary in those early states, there's going to be a built-in layer of Republican, primary voter that's not going to leave President Trump. And how to navigate that when the rest of the vote is sliced up is going to be a really key challenge for the DeSantis team.
How do you believe the governor will use a special session coming up and next year's full legislative session to increase either his visibility or place on the tout board, if you will, accomplishments that those in the MAGA movement and Republicans writ large might want to cheer or applaud?
Well, Ron DeSantis does have a really good sort of internal political radar. So he's used his last, and especially after sort of the height of the pandemic, he's used his growing platform to tout things like, parental choice versus, sort of school, teachers unions, ESG, some of the major issues today that are playing really well with the Republican base. The past 2 legislative sessions here in Florida, Governor DeSantis has really amplified some of those things. And I would expect the same thing moving forward. We're going to have things like open carry from a firearm standpoint. I would imagine there's going to be a post-Roe abortion bill here again. So I think what we're going to expect moving forward is a lot of what we've seen already, which is DeSantis playing into sort of red meat pieces of legislation, but ones that work really well with the Republican base because it's a segment of the voters he has a really good feel on.
So, Matt, in that vein, there's some sound recently from the governor talking about legislation that he wants to pass, and he will have a large Republican majority that might actually follow him on this, to protect doctors and those in the medical community who question the efficacy of vaccines. Let's listen to a soundbite from the governor on that.
We are actually going to be moving through the legislature this year, in the upcoming legislative session in the spring, a bill that actually protects physicians' First Amendment rights, and it protects their right to dissent from orthodoxy and from the establishment.
How do you think that plays? And is there a clamoring in Florida to be either anti-vax or skeptical of vaccines?
Well, the specific anti-vax versus skeptical of vax is sort of hard to suss out with the electorate here. What I would say is Ron DeSantis just won by almost 20 points, which in Florida, a state known for recounts and 2000, that whole debacle is a massive historic number. So Governor DeSantis feels like he really has a mandate right now, and he's going to lean into that. The Republican electorate here really likes DeSantis, but I think it's more nuanced than the midterms would indicate on things like vaccines. But DeSantis himself has sort of had an evolution on the issue. I mean, very early in 2021, he was going on Fox News and actually hosting events to give vaccinations to World War II veterans live on television. So he really leaned into the vaccines for a while, but he has now kind of gone the complete other direction. He's asked Florida Supreme Court to impanel a grand jury to investigate some what he calls misinformation associated with the vaccines. So there's been an evolution with DeSantis on vaccines, and I think what you just highlighted there is sort of the latest iteration of that.
And Matt, it was a historic moment at the White House earlier this week when President Biden signed the Respect of Marriage Act. Governor DeSantis has weighed in on that and did so skeptically, if not hostilely. Let's take a listen to that.
They're using the power, I think, of the federal government in ways that will absolutely put religious institutions in difficult spots if you have people that are so inclined to be very aggressive against that.
Matt, does that also sound like a Republican primary electorate message?
Without question. But there are two things I think to suss out there. It is absolutely speaking to a potential 2024 Republican primary electorate. But also, I do believe that is who DeSantis is, Governor DeSantis is to kind of his core. He is, was a conservative member of Congress when he was there. He's been conservative on a lot of these issues since he's been governor. So I think two things can be true. I think for his team, he views an answer like that as good politics. But I don't think he's necessarily doing it for show or just to pander politically. I do think to his core, some of his comments there are who he is and where his belief structure is.
So, Matt, I want to ask you, since you're in Florida, those of us who remember Ron DeSantis' first bid for governor, remember that was a very, very close race. And as you mentioned, it was not at all close. It was historically large in terms of a landslide victory. Does that speak more to DeSantis' qualities as a leader and a political figure, or something that's going on with Democrats in Florida that is potentially long-term, meaning it is declining in importance in Florida, and Florida is becoming now reliably a red state?
Right. Under the banner of broken record, I'm going to again say both things can be true, because Governor DeSantis has become a national figure. He's very powerful. Republicans here love him. But his quick ascent, he had a recount in his first race. In 2018, he won by like 40,000 votes out of several million cast. It was very close. And he just won by almost 20 points. So that can't happen unless you have an ascendant politician who really knows his base well, but also a complete cratering of his opposition. And Democrats here, the number that a lot of people are pointing to, and I think is very instructive. In 2018, the last midterm here in Florida, national Democratic organizations, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, those organizations that fund Democrats nationally, spent almost $60 million here. This year, 4 years later, they spent less than $2 million. So essentially, Democrats nationally are kind of signaling they're giving up on Florida from their national map. They can get to the White House through the Midwest. They don't need Florida anymore. And I think it was sort of a perfect storm of DeSantis being very powerful, popular, and sort of ascendant, and his political opposition essentially going away. And that's what we saw in the 2022 midterms here in Florida.
Matt Dixon, thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me.